Oh man. Hi everybody. So this is Bookshore again. That sounds stupid. This is Ben again. So we're gonna talk about how to approach Pynchon now. When I mean how to approach Pynchon, I mean which books should you start with? What tips for reading him. First, I'm just gonna go through the order of the books. You can see there's a crap load. Actually, it's not that, he doesn't have that many books. More, his books are just huge. So what I would recommend, it's gonna be based on your reading level, first of all. If you're new to reading, you don't want to go jump into Pynchon's hard stuff because you're just gonna get discouraged. When I jumped into Pynchon, I started Gravity's Rainbow. Got around halfway or quarter way through the book. I'm like, what? And then so I thought, like, let me read Crying of Lot 49. And then I read Crying of Lot 49. I was like, what? Finished Gravity's Rainbow. I'm still like, no idea, man. Like, bits and pieces were getting it. Then I read Mason and Dixon. And after 100 pages, I was like, I get it. And Mason and Dixon is my favorite Pynchon book. Spoilers. So, you don't want to go about it that way, especially if you're diving into him. Pynchon takes a lot of work. He takes a lot of energy. I don't think I was recording. And you don't want to get discouraged because there's a lot to enjoy in Pynchon. There's a lot to digest. And the best advice I heard about reading Thomas Pynchon is that keep going. You're not going to understand everything. I sure as hell didn't. He's still my favorite author. And also my advice when addressing tough literature is that you can always read it again. You can always go back to it. I read Gravity's Rainbow twice, and the second time was after I read all of Pynchon's work, and I loved it. It was incredible. Still not my favorite. It was low on my list at the beginning, but then it raised up because I understood it. So let's get started. There's going to be kind of two branches that I have, skill trees or whatever how you want to say it, that I'll go by. I'm going to kind of start, let's say you are an intermediate. Let's say you're a beginner reader, sorry. If you're more of a beginner, people would probably suggest Crying of Lot 49. I don't recommend that. What I'm going to recommend is Inherent Vice. This is Pynchon's funniest book. It's also his most accessible. So, at Inherent Vice, it's about a stoner at the end of the 60s. Yeah, into the 60s, and, just like being a detective. Now, you're not going to get the full grasp of Pynchon because you're not going to get a lot of his historical. He doesn't drive into the historical stuff. He doesn't drive so much into the transgressive nature of things. He does a little bit with like a blowjob in a car scene, which I think is like probably the worst scene, or a girl who likes to get double teamed. But what you are going to get is that you're going to get a great understanding of his plot structure. You're going to get a great understanding of all the moving bits and how he just likes to add a lot of characters. Plus, there's a movie version of this as well. The movie's not as great. I feel like the movie's a lot more subdued, and with Pynchon's prose, you don't get that bombastic element that you do in the movie. Funny story, I was watching the movie with my friend, and he just turns to me in the middle of the movie like, yo bro, how many characters in this damn movie? I was like, hey man, they cut some people out. So, if you don't totally understand the book or there's elements you're missing, at least you have a visual representation to go to. And I think with the combination of that, you'll get a good idea of how Pynchon likes to go about his plot structure. So after that, what I'm actually going to recommend are two books. And again, I'm kind of also choosing more of his enjoyable books because I feel like there's two in-between books that would be better addressed. However, they're not my favorite, and in some cases of the Pynchon community, they're not considered his best. So it's just better just to go for what's going to be more entertaining. And at this point, if you're an intermediate reader, you can jump into these. I recommend either V or Bleeding Edge. The beautiful thing about V and Bleeding Edge, actually, now that I think about it, Bleeding Edge is his most current book, and V is his first book. That's kind of ironic. But let's start with Bleeding Edge. Now, if you're a millennial like me, you grew up in the 90s, you played Pokemon, you played Final Fantasy, you'll relate to this book a lot. Because while Pynchon was a man born in the 30s, he was able to address 90s culture perfectly. The plot of this book is that it's concerning they'd say it's considering a lot of conspiracy theories giving 9/11, but he never really puts any emphasis on any one conspiracy theory. He doesn't say, he never even say 9/11 wasn't committed by terrorists. It's just kind of more of like the exploration a little bit. But majority of the book is how a woman, a single mom, deals with the world in 90s culture, and how she deals with her kids, her ex-husband, lover, a cyberspace, two Russians who are trying to get COVID information. And it's great because I felt right at home. It's suspected because Pynchon had a kid in his 50s, and he think he's my age actually, and he was suspected that he used his son to help him write stuff. Like he says, like stuff Kojima is God. I was showing references to my friends on group chat, and they were like eating it up a little bit, even though they didn't know it was Pynchon references, but still. So, and also it's not so crazy. It's the history is not so far removed from us, like say Against the Day or even Gravity Dream Boy, Mason and Dixon. This is still within our time period. A lot of you probably grew up with this. So, and he doesn't go as crazy with going all over the place to all the side story. It's still a mainly central focus plot, focusing on the main character who's a single mom. I forgot the name because I read these books like a while ago. But I would say that if you're still on the fence, go for this book. But now, if you like diving into 60s culture, if you like the beatnik movement, if you don't really want to read about 90s culture or 9/11 or stuff, then I'd recommend V for the next one. V is probably my second favorite Pynchon book, funnily enough. It's a bit more modernist in that sense, and you're starting to get the full scope of Pynchon. He starts talking about the hetero tribes. He starts having the crazy bombastic plays in here. The sewer rats that got converted to Christianity. Then deep politics, like the democratic, how Malta became a democratic country. We talk about heterotype racism, diagnostics of radio frequencies during the war. That's when you start to get like the full big scope of Pynchon, the changing character perspectives. But at the same time, there's still like that teenage, early 20s element of just a bunch of people trying to go around the city and finding love and going to different relationships and just not really knowing what they want to do in their life. And you still have that good mystery aspect of it. Well, he focuses on it a bit more also, even though not too many spoilers, but it's a Pynchon ending, the Pynchon open ending, which he does in all of his books. But like it's a really great book. It has a really great feel. Just the prose is really beautiful, and you're not blowing yourself up like you are with the later books. Now at this point, I'm going to address some other books. If these would be books, I would classify more as if you're just a Pynchonite. Like I want to read all his bibliography. I want to know this man and just really get into it. Then these four books would come in. If you don't feel like you're ready enough to jump into the harder literature of Pynchon yet, which we'll address with the last two books, or if you want more of a stopgap, I'd say first Crying of Lot 49. It is only like 152 pages. This is where you really start getting to the full scope of Pynchon, where his earlier works were so difficult. Personally, I have to reread this book. It's not my favorite Pynchon book. Pynchon talks about in Slow Learner that it's one of his worst books as well. Take that as you will. Artists are always kind of funny about the art. Umberto Eco saying Name of the Rose isn't that good, or Danny Vanilevsky, saying that House of Leaves is a love story, which is totally a horror novel, and the book chemist is 100% right about that. But this is a good stopgap, and I think the reason why this book is so popular, it's only 150 pages, and it gives you the full scope of Pynchon. But this one is another one set in like the beatnik era, and this one really addresses Pynchon's main theme of paranoia, of just how do we know stuff is real? How do I know there's not some secret organization, the Yodine Corporation, tracking me? How is it just all in my own head? This is the themes he deals in that. There's a lot of silly stuff. I'm gonna be honest, the humor didn't really work for me that well in the book, and I just didn't really feel that sense of paranoia. I have to reread this book. It is in my docket to reread, but it's a good book if you want more of a stopgap to go into the tougher fiction. Or if you really just want to go into the tougher fiction, I'd probably say read this one first. Next after that is Slow Learner. I haven't read the last two stories in this. I know the last one is talked about one of Pynchon's best works also. Um, Again, it was, how would I describe it? Arthur's first works with short stories. Don't ever read them first. I read Michael Chabon's first short story collection first, and it was crap. I didn't even finish it, but I'm sure Michael Chabon's work is really great. I've heard nothing but great stuff about it, and I have 2 books of his, but it kind of turned me off to Chabon as well. So only read that if you just read the last story if you're curious. But the first few stories, he's a great writer, but you can see it's not as consistent as his other stuff because he was learning. So that's more of like if you just want to read everything. Next, V. There's some aspects I say that are really great about this book, but there's also some aspects that feel really underdeveloped for Pynchon. It's kind of described as the Big Lebowski version of Pynchon, and I wouldn't really agree. I think the Big Lebowski is funnier, but I do agree again with the book chemist on this one. This is a sad book. This is not a humorous, funny, ripping time. I would put that more to Inherent Vice. But this book is about, being screwed up in life and not being able to get anything done and losing your family over it. And it's about the end of a culture. Again, a lot of the themes he addresses in this book is better handled in Inherent Vice. Actually, no, I think Inherent Vice is the most recent book. I forgot. But I would but this is kind of largely considered Pynchon's weakest effort. And I have a theory about that. But read this book only if you're really into Pynchon. It's okay to skip this one. I mean, it's not bad. All of Pynchon's works are like practically masterpieces, but this is like the low tier masterpiece. So you don't have to go for that one. Next, and this is a good book. However, I did have some issues with it. But the reason I would also say is because I would just think I should have just read a genre fiction book more at this point. But I would probably put next would be Against the Day. Beautiful book, huge. I'm not a fan of Westerners, and there's a Western story in this book, and I loved it. It was amazing. However, I wish the novel went a bit further and stuff. I wish it got a little bit more genre fiction towards the end. But the reason I'd probably say this is for only Pynchonites, because what this book is addressing is how the world's changing before World War I, and it's a huge, sprawling epic with characters all across, a lot of American characters going all across the world, has all the ridiculous stuff, has boys flying in an airship solving mysteries, and they do have their own book written about them, has camera magical pseudo technology stuff, has again the Western story, explicit sex scene, depictions of culture all over the earth, kazoo solos and stuff like that, or orchestras. So it is a great book, and it's a really sad book as well. But it just really shows how culture has changed from the early 1900s to the mid 1900s. But the reason I'd probably keep this to more Pynchonites is, look at this thing. It's like how many? It's like just under 1,100 pages. So, well, I did enjoy it, and I think I probably enjoy it more on a second reading, because now that I understand what Pynchon's going for, it's a huge time investment. And I think for somebody who's still on the fence about Pynchon, there's a lot of other books that you can go for. Now, that whole block made it seem like I think most of Pynchon's work is like subpar or something like that, but that's really not the case. But especially with these 2 books, the next ones, which I feel are the pinnacle of Pynchon being complicated, and one of them being the pinnacle of Pynchon and of American literature, and I'm in current rereading right now, is Gravity's Rainbow and Against the Day. Now let's talk about Gravity's Rainbow. First, this is the quintessential postmodern, quintessential Pynchon book. It's about a man who is able to predict the trajectory of V2 rockets before they crash, before they even fired, with his erection. And that's just the startup. Goes back, just goes insane from there. And this is one of the most difficult books I've read. The only book, the most difficult books I consider, in my opinion, well, in terms of literary, I'm still working through Time and Being, would be Gravity's Rainbow and Ulysses right next to each other, and then after that Finnegan's Wake, which I can't even get past 30 pages. But this book is hard. Don't be like me and jump into it immediately. You'll miss a lot. Read the other stuff, get a sense of his style, but also this book, if I can describe this in one word, density. He gives you so much information so quickly, and the book is practically endless. People talk about that, where it's like you can just read this book forever, and I'd probably be inclined to agree. There's so much stuff, even on a second reading, that I didn't get, I'm sure I missed, but the book is so beautiful, horrible, and sad and funny all at the same time. And there was a lot of aspects I read where I was like, I thought Pynchon was maybe being racist or sexist at the beginning, and then I realized it's not so much that he's being sexist, he's more commenting on the sexist nature of society. This book is just really a commentary on the horrors of society and the horrors of human being, and how life and death, and George Bathier talks about this, is interconnected with each other. They're not even different sides of a coin, they're more the same side of the same coin. I will say though, I do enjoy the first section of this book more than the latter section, but the latter section is still great. But like, this is a very difficult book. Use resources, use online guides, use the book chemist. He has a whole reading guide. Use different YouTubers. Just don't be afraid to get auxiliary information, because you're not going to understand everything on the first reading. And sometimes when I was reading it, having trouble understanding the plot was difficult at times. But once you do go through it, once you get it, it is a very enjoyable experience. And now let's talk about my favorite book. Has almost everything I want out of a book. It's my favorite book of all time, Mason and Dixon. It's not as hard as Gravity's Rainbow. That might be because I already read it at the time. One of the tougher parts is that it's more in 17th century prose. Really, the style and the vernacular in it. There's some modern stuff thrown in as well. However, this book is beautiful. The language in this book is gorgeous. It's one of those things where you just kind of aspire to write too. And that's why my theory of Vineland wasn't as great, because there was a 17-year period where Pynchon didn't publish anything, and I think it's because he was writing this book, and I think he just kind of farted out Vineland just to have something else out there, maybe just like a palate cleanser for himself. But this book is about Mason and Dixon making the Mason and Dixon line the bottom line of the state of Pennsylvania. That's the setup. That sounds horribly boring. This book is amazing. It's one of the best commentaries I've seen on American society. It has all this silly stuff that's actually really funny, and it just again, a really sad book just on where American society could have gone and could have been. And I'm gonna give some slight spoiler examples from the book on this one. There's a scene where I believe it was after he saw well, there's two scenes. So one scene is Mason and Dixon are talking to each other, and they say, out of all the places we've been to, Cape Town, Africa, whatnot, British Isles, America's the last place we should have seen slaves. America should have been so much more than the older worlds. We should have been there, but there's so much potential in America, but we're still stuck with the same stuff. We're still stuck with genocide. We're still stuck with slavery. We're still stuck with the power struggles of the economy. And it's just sad that America's like that. But then he'll have funny stuff of a mechanical duck in it. And it just all flows so beautifully. And then he'll talk about mythology of America, and he'll talk about how America will be in the future. And then he'll talk about the personal struggles of the characters, and the things they couldn't achieve in life, the things that held them back in life, not being in the Americas for so long and not being able to see the sun. And this book is very much a double frame narrative, where it's a family set after the events of the book, talking about Mason and Dixon with Reverend D. Cherry Coke, and then also the Mason and Dixon in the middle part of the book. It's more of an episodic kind of nature, where it's not so much the Pennsylvania line aspects. If that kind of turns you off, that takes a backseat immediately, and it just focuses all on the funny folklore stuff, like Native Americans doing the Spock symbol and whatnot. But with Gravity's Rainbow, this is the most Pynchon book you can get. However, I feel like it handles a lot of the themes in Gravity's Rainbow better, or like a lot of the themes throughout his bibliography a lot better, and the writing is just immaculate. You really just can't beat it. if it wasn't such a difficult and long book, I would recommend it to everybody. But if you ever interested in Pynchon, I would say this is the book that you want to aspire to read too. It's that good. I cannot recommend it enough. So I hope you like this. It's going to be a companion video to another one where I talk about Pynchon. If you want me to do this with other genres, like I eventually like to do this with Laney as well, but I can, not genres, authors, but I can do this with Umberto Eco. I can kind of do with Joyce. I can't finish Finnegan's Wake. That's a goal of mine, but it's Finnegan's Wake. I can do this with other stuff as well. I can probably talk about Luis Borges a bit more. I still have to read all of his short stories. But if you want me to do this with another author or stuff like that, or a series like that, let me know. If you want me to talk about postmodernism more in general, or answer any questions about Pynchon, let me know in the comments. I can talk about Pynchon all day, so, and I'd be happy to do that. And this is just a rough guide, and God, this must have gone on for like 20 minutes already. But let me know, and have a great day.